So I should definitely be getting some sleep right now, getting some much needed rest, but I'm gonna come back right here before I go to sleep to give y'all another True School Sports special report. I didn't plan on doing this video. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to touch this video, to be honest with you, but this video is my reaction to the fact that Terence Crawford is not a happy guy in retirement. Terence Crawford is very bitter and bored, and I would even frankly say jealous of Jaron Ennis in retirement, because how can you have accomplished as much as Terence Crawford and be just so unhappy, about insecure with your career? Because he was on Twitter yesterday, and he tweeted out all of his accomplishments. So let me read them to you, so we all know the caliber of fighter we're talking about here when we speak about Bud. He tweeted the following, and I quote: 42-0, the former number one best fighter in the world pound for pound, 5-division world champion, 3-time undisputed, 4-time unified champion, 2-time fighter of the year, 3-time ESPN fighter of the year, 20 consecutive world title fights, and a Hall of Famer soon to be. Sorry, but not sorry for being great. Hey on your mama. And that's Terence Crawford. That's what he said, right? And this all comes off the heels of Terence doing an interview with, Ak and Barack, where he stated that pretty much he feels that Jaron Ennis is a hater. And he went as far as to say that Jaron Ennis, he built his whole motion and his whole clout off of the Terence Crawford name. And this also comes after the fact that the day right after Jaron Ennis beat Xander Zayas in his finest hour, Terence Crawford did an interview and pretty much said that if he ever fought Boots, he'd be 10 steps ahead of him and things like that. But at the same time, Terence Crawford is the same guy that will criticize people like myself or people in the media and say that the media never gives credit when he got more than his fair share of credit. And it's actually Bud. It's actually Boots' fellow fighter that's downplaying him and hating. So when Terence talks about people downplaying fighters, he's talking about himself. And I'm saying all this, and I'm setting the stage to tell you guys that, like, look, man, it's July 29th as I'm shooting this. It's been about 10 months and some change since Terence Crawford's last fight against Canelo Alvarez. So to me, he's still not even retired. There's some world champions out there that have had a longer layoff than Terence Crawford. So to me, he's not retired, and I don't think he's enjoying the life of being a commentator. I still feel like he knows within his soul that there's still more that he wants to give to the sport of boxing. And I also think that a big part of him is bothered by the success of Jaron Ennis, because this was a guy that just 3 years ago, when he was getting ready to fight Errol Spence in his mega fight, a lot of the hardcore boxing fans like myself, like Sean Tuttle, like many people, like I'm sure a lot of you guys out there watching this in 2023, I'm sure a lot of you guys wanted to see Jaron Ennis versus Terence Crawford, even maybe a little more than Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence, because we all knew that Errol Spence really was not as good as Terence Crawford. And let's be real, I made a lot of fun of it back in the day, but there might be there's some truth to the fact that Earl got into a car crash, and maybe he was a compromised version of himself, right? But Terence did his thing. Terence handled his business and did it in spectacular fashion, like he always did. So we can't take that from him. But what I'm saying is, by the time Terence and Earl came around in July of 2023, I think people already kind of knew deep down, at least the real honest people, they knew deep down that this young kid in Philadelphia was good enough to be on that stage of Terence Crawford even back then. And Terence, on his throne said, hey, Boots is a great fighter, but I don't gain nothing from fighting him, and they're never going to give me the credit, right? So he decided not to fight him, right? He fought Madrimov, which, again, just like I gave Virgil criticism for it, Terence gets the criticism for it too, because Madrimov is one of the most overrated fighters in the sport of boxing. And I'm tired of y'all acting like you think Madrimov is this and he's that. Madrimov is awkward. He's a good fighter in terms of him being awkward. He has a lot of pedigree, but he's not that level of fighter. And it's been shown time and time again. Virgil Ortiz showed you guys that, right? After Terence. So all I'm saying is this, man. If Terence has a lot to be proud of from where he came from in his life, from what we know about him, coming from Omaha, Nebraska. When he turned pro, and I know this, and I have it on good authority from a lot of people in the fight game that was back then, that were on the inside with Top Rank and in many promotional companies, that none of the big promoters wanted Terence. Nobody wanted Terence. Nobody wanted Terence to, they didn't want to sign him because they didn't think a fighter from Omaha, Nebraska could sell and be a commercially viable fighter. So this is a guy that fought on Brandon Rios prelims, and this is a guy that really did get it from the mud, and he did earn everything he's got. And you can't take that from Terence Crawford, because he wasn't one of these guys that had the red carpet rolled out for him right off the bat. That is true. There is truth to that. But for all the great things he's done, for all the amazing accomplishments he has, all the money he's made, the Saudis brought the Brinks truck for him, and he helped usher in this new Turkey Al Sheikh Zuffa boxing era, which, depending on what you think about that, you can have your own interpretation about that. But he's made all these great accomplishments. He's done all these great things, even according to himself, because he was talking to the fans and asking, and he was answering questions. He's a guy that has been to like 10 countries this year. He was, he's been doing his traveling. He just did some great things for the people in Africa, building learning centers and things like that. So he's doing great things, and I'm sure there are parts of his soul that are very content and are very happy and are very proud of what he accomplished. However, when it comes to that competitive side of Terence Crawford, that fighter part of Terence Crawford, that fighter spirit part of Terence Crawford, that part has not been put fully to bed, because he knows there's still more to give, and he knows that this young kid from Philadelphia is the truth. Jaron Ennis is a fantastic fighter, and they should have fought in 2023. That was the fight I wanted to see in 2023. I thought before Earl Spence and Bud fought in 2023, I thought that Earl Spence was the third best welterweight in the world. I didn't think he was better than Jaron Ennis before they fought Terence. And I was saying it back then. There's not a new opinion. I was saying it back then. I can get the clips if you want the clips. But, yeah. My thing with Terence is this, man. Either, you can do whatever you want, right? But if you're going to have all these words about Jaron Ennis and, downplay him and discredit him and say that, he built his whole clout off you and his whole name off you and these kind of things, and call him a hater and say that you be 10 steps ahead of him and what you could have did, what you should have did. Why don't you just come back and just fight him? Why don't you just come back and just fight the guy? If you got all these things that are not so glowing and not so negative, and you know how to crack the Jaron Ennis code, why don't you show us? You showed us 42 times against the guys you fought. What's a 43rd, right? You ain't been out the ring for even a year yet. So, and who knows? Terence is a smart guy. Maybe unbeknownst to us, maybe he's been doing a little training here and there, because he was like that for Canelo. He was doing certain types of training before the Canelo fight was even announced to the public. So maybe he's already training for Boots. Maybe he's like that. Who knows? But either way, that's where I stand, because it's getting annoying. It's getting annoying to see such a great fighter not be happy with what he accomplished. Because I'm sorry. It's one thing to talk trash, but there's a fine line between talking trash and good fun and not being happy with what you did in the sport. And I don't know how he can't be happy with what we did in the sport. He's literally a 5-division champ. There's only like 6 of those, right? You boxing royalty. Like, we can't take that from Buddy. You boxing royalty. You're a great fighter. Definitely one of my favorite fighters. Definitely someone that I love to watch fight. In fact, the reason I went to New York City when I was 21 years old, the first time I ever went to New York City was specifically to go cover Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford is what brought BT to go watch boxing, big-time boxing in New York for the first time. So I love Terence Crawford, and I've always enjoyed his career, but it's clear to see that he is not happy with his accomplishments. And my thing is if you feel so strongly about these things about Jaron Ennis, why don't you come out of retirement and show us how it's done? That's really where I'm at. And I was of the mindset, I remember in 2023, I did a video a couple days after the Spence fight, and I basically made a video and I said that if Terence Crawford and Jaron Ennis were to ever fight, that my pick for the fight would have been Terence Crawford on points. I thought he would have beat Jaron Ennis outboxing him. That's what I thought back then. Now, I mean, I still think Terence is in great shape. I think he definitely knows how to box. He showed it in the Canelo fight. He showed it when he's needed to, but he's naturally an apex predator. They're both apex predators. They both switch. I think it'd be like one of the most electric fights we've seen ever if it would have happened. So my thing is, it's hard for me to pick against Terence Crawford, but it's also hard to pick against Jaron Ennis. I've never picked against Jaron Ennis, right? So that being said, if they were to fight, I might still lean towards Bud just because Bud knows how to win and Bud is so smart, and I think he might be a better technical boxer than Boots and maybe a better counterpunch. But at the same time, it's like I don't even feel confident about it because he's not, he's older and your legs are the first thing to go. This ain't Canelo Alvarez. This is a young, hungry, pissed off fighter for greatness in his prime. So this ain't the same thing as that. I don't even know. I don't even want to make a prediction. All I'm saying is, and I know I'm rambling, so if you made it this far, thank you for listening to me flesh out my thoughts on this because I gotta flesh out my thoughts on this. But if you're not gonna fight Jaron Ennis and show us that you're this superior fighter to him and this, that, and the third, then stop talking negatively about him and stop saying that he ate all his clout off of you, because that's not true. I like Bud and I like Boots, but I'm not no dick right. I tell her how it is. That's not true. Jaron Ennis made his hype in boxing with all the spectacular performances he was putting on Showbox. In fact, the first Jaron Ennis fight where he really put the people on the game as to who he was when he fought Armando the Gentleman Alvarez. He did a lot of showboat in that fight, was very flashy. He really stood out. He was one of if you didn't know who he was before that fight, you knew who he was after, and you kept tabs on him from there on out. And he didn't need Terence Crawford to build up hype. They both were signed by the same person, which was Cameron Duncan. And Cameron Duncan himself, he did an interview with Fred from Barbershop Conversations. Cameron Duncan himself did an interview before he passed away on Barbershop Conversations with Fred, and he said that he feels that if Bud and Boots ever fought each other, that he thought Boots would beat Terence Crawford because he feels like he's just bigger than Terence and he's stronger than Terence, and a lot of the things Terence could do, he could do at a big, being a bigger guy, and that'd be why he favored him. And he was telling us back in 2020 that the world just doesn't understand how good Jaron Ennis is. So that's my thoughts on that. You both were signed by the same person who's one of the greatest boxing managers of all time. Boots was having statement performances on Showtime. I was there when he knocked out Thomas Delome in a round back at the Mandalay Bay. So, I mean, he was getting his hype without you. And then after a while, it was like, okay, this guy's a damn good switch hitter. This guy really can box southpaw. He can box orthodox. He's sharp. He started getting Roy Jones Jr. comparisons because of the spectacular performances he was putting on. It wasn't because of Terence Crawford. Let's be real. Because if you just do the timelines, right? Boots was putting on a lot of these big-time performances in 2020, 2021 when his name started really first pop off. And in and around that time, Terence Crawford was in the middle of, getting overpaid like $7 million to fight washed-up Amir Khan and Mean Machine and these kind of guys. Terence Crawford, at that time, was in the middle of complaining about PBC fighters like Earl Spence ducking and avoiding him. And by the time the Sean Porter fight rolled around in 2021, what was it, 2021 or 2022? One of those years. I think 2022. By the time he fought Sean Porter in, I think, 2022, you were suing Bob Arum for racism and discrimination and things like that. So my thing is, if you were this big superstar fighter that Jaron Ennis was building his clout off of, why were you trying to sue your promoter for racism? Because he didn't get you certain fights, It seems like you weren't big enough. Seems like you weren't big enough for another fight to build their clout off of. So, I don't know. I'll leave it at that. You guys can leave it at that in the comments down below. But yeah, my thing is with Boots, Terence, stop talking bad about Boots or fight him. But don't do both. You can't talk bad about him and say what he's not and say he's this and he's that and then not fight him and just commentate his fights on TNT. So I'll leave it at that.